Episode 59, Pregnancy is Autistic.
Welcome to the Autistic Culture Podcast. Each episode, we dive deep into autistic contributions to society and culture by introducing you to some of the world's most famous and successful autistics in history.
Before we get started, a quick disclaimer on how we use the word autistic. The purpose of this show is not to diagnose the people or characters we discuss as autistic. While some may have announced being autistic, what we're really sharing here is our observation of what is representative of autistic culture. It can sometimes be difficult for autistic people to celebrate our natural tendencies and traits due to the perception of autism as a disorder that needs to be fixed, a long history of damaging medical interventions to get autistics to fit in with mainstream culture, and protective masking skills many of us have developed to try to stay safe.
Whether you are autistic or just love someone who is, your hosts, Dr. Angela Lauria, the linguistic autistic,
and licensed psychological practitioner Matt Lowry, welcome you to take this time to be fully immersed in the language, values, traditions, norms, and identity of Autistica.
Well, hey, Matt.
Hey, Angela. How are you?
Guess what we're going to talk about today?
Oh, I can't even imagine.
We're going to talk about pregnancy. I suspect you're an expert.
Yes, I have bore many children with my man womb.
Yes. Well, put your mansplaining hat on and you can tell me all about my experiences with pregnancy.
Absolutely, because that is my job as a cisgender white man, to tell you exactly what to do with your body and how.
Right. I'm going to try and keep this interesting for you, but I am an open book, so feel free to ask me anything. There is so little information out there about pregnancy and autistic people.
Yes.
Like literally almost nothing. So I wanted to do this episode because it is as we are recording, it is the 18th anniversary of me giving birth to my one and only child.
That was a use of pregnancy. Yes.
Yes. And so this seems like a great way to celebrate my son Jesse's 18th birthday. I think it's a tradition a lot of women have to tell their kids their birth story, like on their birthday.
Well,
so
I mean, you were there, so.
Yes, and they were too, but not so cognizant just yet. So I am going to tell my birth story on this show, but when I was pregnant and when I gave birth, I did not know I was autistic. So I'm going to do a little bit of a reframe. And as I do this, I think it's really important. This is why I think diagnosis is so important. Identification is so important, because you will see what I would have done differently that would have made this a much more pleasant experience, and still
it's
not
supposed
great.
To be pleasant?
Well, it still wouldn't be great, but not knowing I was autistic definitely made it much worse. So there's a quote that I found. There's literally very, very little written, but this was a great first person story that I found by, it's going to test my skills of name pronunciation. Alicia, I'm going to go with Troutwine. And Alicia wrote a first person piece in Mother Figure. I'm going to link to it. But this is what she said. And I think this is a great place to start. So you can share that.
The biggest struggle with being autistic and pregnant is not realizing that your needs are not being met.
Yeah. Now, if you also don't know that you're autistic, that's going to be even harder to get your needs met. So step one in this process is identification or diagnosis.
Yes.
Step 2, which is the harder step, which is actually getting your needs met. Good luck with that piece. But if you don't even know that you're going to have different needs, it's going to be very hard to get them met. There is literally almost no research out there. I found one study, and I did think it was a pretty good study.
Yeah.
So I do also want to share that it is from the Frontiers in Psychiatry.
Ooh.
And it is the October 2023 issue. So we're recording in February 2024. When I started researching this article, this study hadn't been done. And, it is a meta-analysis, but here is the finding. And then once we do these sort of broad strokes, I'm just going to tell you my actual story. So here's the findings from that study.
Our study found that women with ASD face unique challenges during childbirth that differ from those of neurotypical women. Participants often felt belittled, ignored, and uninformed about the care they received, and being placed at the center of attention was often seen as negative and hindering rather than positive. However, the research shows us how some quote-unquote expected results, such as difficulties in breastfeeding, have been disproven. So the expectation is that women can't do basic things, but somehow often, yeah.
I actually did have trouble breastfeeding, and I am curious when we get to that. I'm going to walk you through my pregnancy and labor and delivery, and then we'll talk a little about breastfeeding because it happens. There was a lot of trauma around my breastfeeding, and I was actually surprised they didn't find that. So they haven't found a connection to autism, but I still think there might be one. So they do suggest further study there. But
yeah.
All right. So let's roll back to the beginning of my story. Like many autistic people, autistic AFAB people anyway, I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Do you know what that is, Matt?
That is a condition where so it turns out ovaries are made of connective tissue. And for some reason, autistic people have wonky connective tissue, which leads to a lot of EDS and, those kind of things. And autistic women are also more likely to develop PCOS, where you get these cysts all over your ovaries that can somehow spread from ovaries to like your spine and generally glue your insides together with a whole bunch of cysts, causing like infertility, back problems, all of your insides getting all mucked up. And apparently there's a lot that is not understood about this because it's not well researched, especially for autistic women.
Hey, that was so good. It was like mansplaining, but you were right.
Because I don't have the ovaries, but I hear stories of them, so I claim that knowledge as my own.
Yes. Well, you did a great job. That's exactly it. I was diagnosed with PCOS, and my doctor, who I really like, she was super cool. She was like, look, you're probably not going to be able to get pregnant, but give it a try for a year. And at the end of the year, if you're not pregnant, we'll start infertility treatments or whatever. And so I basically stopped paying attention. I was sort of running out the clock because I knew like, oh, surprise, my body sucks. Like I already got that memo. So I was like, at the end of a year, I want to say maybe this was probably in March. And so I was like, next March, I will go back and start the actual fertility. I think I asked if I could start early, and she's like, no, you got to try for a year. I was like, fine.
A year.
So
good Lord.
I think that's just like their standard. I was 32, maybe 31, 32. So they're like, yeah, just see if you can get pregnant on your own, whatever. So,
birth, neat.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, there was sperm donor involved.
Yeah. Just try harder.
So I wasn't really worried about getting pregnant because I didn't think I could get pregnant. And I ended up going on this work trip. I was in England for like 6 weeks. And every day I would get home from work or get back to the hotel from work. And I would go to bed like 6 p.m. maybe. And I thought that was probably jet lag, but I did it for 6 weeks. And at the end of these 6 weeks, I was going to meet my husband. I was going to fly from England, where I was on vacation, to Seattle. And we were going on a little like vacation. And I got to Seattle and we went to, I think actually we might have gone to British Columbia. We were in Victoria, British Columbia. There's a beautiful state house we toured. And then there's this rolling hills of the state house lawn. And we sat down on the state house lawn and I fell asleep. And I literally slept through this whole trip. I was super excited to go to the first Starbucks in Seattle.
Oh, wow.
And I like couldn't even walk in the door. It smelled like coffee, which is like one of my favorite things. So it was very strange. But
a Starbucks smelling like coffee, you said?
Yeah. I was like, something's wrong with this Starbucks. Like it really smells horribly. And I couldn't eat and I couldn't stay awake. And at some point, somebody suggested I might be pregnant. I don't know if it was like my mom or my sister, but I knew I couldn't be pregnant because PCOS, and my doctor told me. And it turns out I was extraordinarily pregnant. I was like 8 weeks pregnant before I figured it out.
Wow.
So that is our first stopping point in this journey, which is interoception is fascinating.
It is. Should we tell people what interoception
I'm like,
is?
yes. So why don't you talk a little about interoception, and then I'll tell you how it showed up when I was very, very pregnant and maybe should have known I was pregnant.
So interoception is the set of like inside senses that we have to tell what our meat body is doing. And it can deal with the sense of hunger, the sense of thirst, being aware that you need to go to the bathroom, being aware that you're full, being aware that you're sleepy, all of this stuff. And whereas most people don't have any issues at all, we have a ton of issues, even emotions, because we tend to cognitively process emotions rather than physically feel emotions. Because whereas most people get hot and cold throughout their bodies to differentiate what emotional states they're in, because most people feel warm when happy, cold when sad. And it turns out that the phrase "to get cold feet" means that your feet feel physically cold because you have anxiety. And I find that baffling. But
all of this is such a mystery to me.
Yeah. We tend to get headaches, chest pains, sweaty palms, and stomach aches. And then we say, oh, my meat body is acting up again. Stop it. And that might mean that we're hungry. That might mean that we're sleepy. Who knows? It's a crapshoot.
Well, it turns out it meant I was pregnant. Ooh. But that didn't occur to me because cognitively I had processed the information. You are not going to get pregnant for a year. A lady with a lab coat told me.
So you took that option off the table because mentally it was not there.
Right. She's like, look, it's very rare. It's not going to happen, but we got to give it a year. So I was like, well, that's not an option.
Yeah.
Maybe it's jet lag. Like, I don't know. And then I had a whole theory about how Starbucks burns their beans more in Seattle and all the beans were burnt. And like I'm sure the coffee smelled lovely at that Starbucks.
The great Seattle bean fire. Yes. Yes.
At literally any other possible reason. It just did not compute. And right there, we go back to the quote that started this episode, which is about getting your needs met and not realizing your needs aren't being met. So obviously I didn't know I was autistic, but I didn't know that my pregnancy starting off this way was like a very big sign of many of the things that would come. Because I had these ideas in my head of what being pregnant would be like.
Yeah.
I don't know, from TV. I'm not sure where movies. They came.
Yeah.
Think back to the last time you saw an autistic woman represented in the media, or an autistic pregnant person represented in the media. Big Bang Theory, like even shows that we know are autistic.
Yeah, none of them, because they're, there was no the only one that was autistic coded was Maya Bialik's character, Amy Farrah Fowler, and while canonically they did have children, they was never shown on the show. It was never
shown
addressed.
on the show.
Yeah, and like shows like It's Gonna Be Okay, none of them
Dudes.
ever had children.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of a single autistic female character that has ever experienced pregnancy on TV.
Isn't that interesting?
Wow. That is...
It's a major issue.
Complete lack of representation.
Total and utter. And there is, I would say, like, I haven't done the math on this, but when you think of the percentage of people that are pregnant at any one time and the percentage of people that are pregnant in entertainment at any one time, I bet there is an overrepresentation of pregnancy.
Yes.
In the media, because it's just like a good, it's like a good plot device. There's urgency. I feel like every single show I've ever watched has some sort of pregnancy scene.
You have to drive to the hospital.
You have to drive to the hospital.
There's lots of heavy breathing.
There's water, which actually most people don't have their water break like that. That's not a thing. But anyway.
Yeah.
When autistic people find a special interest, they go deep and have a lot of knowledge, even if they don't have that formal education background to go with it. If you want to capture your spin in a book, check out Angela's work at differencepress.com, differencepress.com, and find out more about becoming an author and establishing your credibility with a book.
But yeah, there's so much pregnancy. You got one for me?
Elizabeth Zott. How could I forget?
Oh,
Elizabeth Zott and Mad Zott. I totally forgot.
That's true.
And podcast listeners, I heard you screaming through the void of space and time because you were screaming this the entire time. Especially you. You know who you are.
Right.
And that's
we got it. We got it.
Yeah, but that's the thing that when Elizabeth Zott was giving birth, they said just name the child the first thing that you feel. Mad. Like, okay, the child will be mad. Madeline? No, just mad. Yeah, just frustrated that she had to deal with all this. But again, it didn't deal with the particulars, and a lot of her pregnancy was spent focusing on her work, doing cognitive stuff, fighting the battles with being a single mother at her job. But again, not a lot of the interoceptive stuff, not a lot of the doctors saying, "Oh, I don't believe you at all," because
we're going to get to that. How'd you know we were going to get to that?
It's a depressing thing that I've come to expect in every area.
Okay.
But yes,
coming soon. Okay, so there is a very famous, I would say, toxic book, but it is sold 1.8 billion copies approximately, which is called What to Expect When You're Expecting. They even managed to turn a manual into a movie, which is all very unclear, but somehow they did it.
Yeah.
And when you get pregnant, you also sign up for a bunch of emails that tell you, like, today your baby is a tadpole. Today your baby's a lima bean. Do you remember those from the Emmett days?
I own the book, and I got the emails, and remember going to the grocery store and saying, "Oh, look, he's this big today. Oh, or the baby is this big today," because again, at that point, didn't know what the baby was, so. Just say, "Oh, the baby is this big."
So I'm sure all that stuff was true. I mean, I don't know how big my baby was, but all of the things they described about what I was going through, I wasn't going through, but I used the book as a little bit of a masking textbook.
Ooh.
So it would tell me how I was supposed to feel. Like, you're 10 weeks pregnant. You're probably feeling... And then it would tell me, and I would be like, when people ask how you're feeling, answer per the instructions in this email.
And you didn't know you were autistic. That's fascinating.
Right. Yeah. No one told me.
Oh, boy.
I didn't know. But then I went to pregnancy yoga. So this is a little bit more interoception, but pregnancy yoga was super I think they call it prenatal yoga. It's super, the one that I went to was super woo-woo. And what we were going to do was like connect with our baby. I don't know, lie on a mat and you could talk to your baby or something. And there was there's none of this for me. There was the only thing that I felt was like, I love my child. I love my child. I love my child. Sorry. That's the caveat for the whole episode. Now I'm going to say not nice things. When you have a rock in your shoe that you're sure is the size of a boulder and you take it out and it's like the size of like the tip of a pin or something?
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, why did that feel so huge? Okay. That is what it felt like I had. I kept calling it a football-sized tumor.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I imagine what stomach cancer would feel like, that is what I was experiencing.
Yeah. Because
no joy, no bonding. I was not talking to this inanimate thing. I didn't have dreams. We didn't communicate about what he wanted his name to be. None of this.
Yeah.
Football-sized tumor.
Because that's the thing. That's the biological reception that you have. And again, it's instead of, well, and that's the thing. I don't know. Granted, my circle is a wee bit limited due to my profession and the fact that I talk about autism 24/7, because there's not a lot of neurotypical people who say, hey, sign me up for that. So all of my friends are autistic, and many autistic womb havers have described similar stuff, because it's not as though you're automatically that you automatically download this magical experience where you connect with the divine and this kind of stuff, but you
I
are
feel
aware
like
of your
if
body.
you were a top-down processor, maybe you would develop I don't know why it does that. Maybe you would develop some hypothesis. I can talk to my baby in the womb.
Yeah.
And then you would look for evidence that was true. So I don't know, some butterfly would land on the seat next to you and you're like, oh, that's my baby telling me he wants to be named Butterfly. I think that's how it works. This is my understanding of neurotypical culture. But for me, the only inputs I got were like, feel crappy. So I wasn't like, oh, feel crappy, emanate love. Do you see how that?
All I can think of is, have you ever seen Total Recall?
Yes, Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe?
Yeah, right. So on Mars, the mutants are led by Quato, the mutant like baby who lives in like the man's stomach.
Oh,
and
yes.
Psychic stuff. Open your mind. And there was a whole Rick and Morty episode about it. But yeah,
right.
When you say that some people can psychically connect with their children, that's what I'm picturing. And I find that to be fascinating.
But I can see how that experience could feel real. If you start with top-down processing and you're like, there is a person, a full human inside of me with a soul. And I believe souls are separate or something. And souls can communicate across time and space. If you have that philosophy, then you're only going to look for evidence that matches that philosophy. But because I'm a bottom-up processor, I was like, here are the symptoms I'm experiencing. I throw up nonstop 24 hours a day. I can no longer sleep. I can only eat mashed potatoes and vanilla ice cream, and even that I throw up. I feel terrible. I cannot type any longer, and I am a professional writer because my wrists are so swollen. I have carpal tunnel. These are the bits of data, and then the hypothesis I form in my bottom-up thinking is football-sized tumor.
Yeah.
Get this fucking thing out of my body. It is fucking killing me, and I hate it and everything to do with it.
Yeah. This is a common thing that I've run into with a lot of autistic women, because again, when discussing the option of kids, especially when in the dating world, there are a lot of autistic women out there, but unless they already have kids through other means, a lot of autistic women absolutely do not want kids because of the toll that the human making process takes on the body. Because again, from the bottom up processing, you say, well, there's a risk of death in childbirth. All of your bones shift around. You have to shoot a watermelon out of your crotch. Boy, that sounds unpleasant.
Right. I love my child. I promise I love my child, but I, if I don't think I made a great decision.
Yeah.
Like first of all, I went to my doctor and said, hey, I'm married. We want to start having kids. She was like, great, you have PCOS, but I can't start infertility. So try for a year. I was like, awesome. We'll try for a year. Then I'm going to go on infertility treatment. I was thinking about this outcome that I imagined. I don't know what the hell I was imagining. I definitely didn't think about being pregnant. And we're going to do a whole nother episode on motherhood because holy cow, noise and sticky hands and personal space invasion. Like, I got a whole thing about motherhood, but this was not really, I did not do a sensory profile of my needs.
A sensory profile. Explain.
Oh, well, so every person, I think, whether you're neurodivergent or not, has different sensory needs, but we don't really talk about that. So there are actually 8 senses, I think.
8 senses, you say?
8, yes.
Yeah.
I only knew about 5 until I figured out I was autistic. So we can run through what those are. But everybody, it's like a sliding scale of different needs. So for instance, for me, for a lot of people, they have sensitivity to light. And my husband is one of those people. And there are things they need to know. And maybe you also have epilepsy. So you have particular sensitivity to strobing light. My needs when it comes to light are very low. I don't have that many. I take sunglasses with me pretty much everywhere. But other than that, there are no precautions I need to take. My needs when it comes to smell are extraordinarily high. So it's not an even profile. It's not like, oh, she's super sensitive. I'm so sensitive in some areas and so not sensitive in other areas. And I have synesthesia.
Oh.
And so that causes a whole nother set of challenges.
Which is actually fairly common for autistic people due to the hyperconnected brain cross wiring.
It's like, we're going to give you both. So like smells, like, they lead to a whole set of other inputs, highly muted interoception being one of them, increased proprioceptive needs. So it's not just my profile fixed in time, but it's when there's one input, everything shifts around. So one of the best things that I've done to get my needs met is just know what they are.
Yeah. And that's essential because that's the thing. The neurotypical world does not talk about that.
I guess they have fewer needs.
Yeah. It's just
therefore we just look like a pain in the, like, I literally complained about smells my whole life. And then when I was pregnant, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't smell anything. It was really hard for me to have my cats when I was pregnant. Like every smell, I was 100% of the time throwing up nonstop. So, but let's talk about what the 8 senses are, just so people know.
Oh, so your 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, and so you got a few others. For instance, we've been talking about interoception. We've got vestibular sense, proprioceptive sense. What else is there?
That's it. Interoception,
proprioception,
yeah,
and the ability to see dead people.
That's actually not one of them.
Yes.
We're going to revoke that LLP. Yeah. Careful there.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're M. Night Shyamalan, because then it is possible.
It's a movie.
Yeah. So I didn't even know I had different needs. And then the thing about pregnancy that makes this really interesting, and this is even like, okay, when I was traveling and I was pregnant, some of those signs I chalked up to the fact I was traveling. I'm like, oh, I have jet lag. Oh, the jet lag's really bad, right? So I'm like misappropriating that. And then when I had morning sickness, so when I was pregnant, I was throwing up all the time, which I thought was, I don't know, burnt beans in Seattle or whatever. But then I kept throwing up and people kept saying it's hypermesis gravidarium or whatever it is, which is the fancy word for morning sickness. And there were drugs that were prescribed to me, and ginger and I don't know, smelling salts. I had every possible cure for morning sickness. But what I didn't realize is that not only do your sensory needs change in pregnancy, that like your whole profile changes, but for many people, I can't speak for all people, but for me, everything was heightened.
Yes.
So they would talk about food cravings and make jokes about like, oh, your food craving is pickles. So I thought I had food cravings, but what really happened is my same foods went down to vanilla ice cream, one brand, Breyer's French vanilla ice cream, and potatoes, and they had to be Yukon Gold mashed potatoes with Kerrygold butter. That was it. Those were the options. Eat that or nothing.
This is the way. Yeah.
So, I mean, my food list, I'm a picky eater anyway, and I have, a small but reasonable same foods list. Now I was down to 2, and even then I was throwing up all the time. So I wasn't attributing that to, oh, maybe I have different needs. I was attributing it, like my doctor and friends and family, to morning sickness.
Yes.
And then people have an image of how bad morning sickness should be and how long it should last. And mine was not fitting that profile. So first of all, it's supposed to be in the morning. Second of all, it's supposed to last the first 3 months. So mine was 24/7, woke me up. I had to wake up to throw up. I could not drive anywhere without a large mouth bottle Gatorade.
Oh, God.
And I filled a Gatorade bottle with throw up all day long. That was fun.
Oh, my.
I could no longer brush my teeth. So I had to find alternatives to teeth brushing, because as soon as I put a toothbrush in my mouth, I would throw up all over the toothbrush, which is a fun experience if you haven't had that one. And so then we got back to people's favorite thing, the same people who tell me I don't look autistic and why do I have to talk about being autistic all the time? Those people like to call me too dramatic.
Oh, God.
You're so dramatic. Why are you so dramatic? Why couldn't you just have morning sickness like everyone else? Then we get into like, am I faking it for attention? The little girl who cried wolf. Oh, I don't understand why these people wouldn't be like, oh, you're autistic. This makes so much sense because we thought you were just really annoying as a kid.
Yeah.
But no, they're like, why is she pretending to be autistic and making all this shit up? And also, why are you so fucking dramatic that you can't brush your teeth for 9 months? So,
yeah,
I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's some weird confirmation bias. Because, oh, you're too normal to be autistic, and then all of a sudden you're not normal anymore. And they, well, stop acting weird because you're too dramatic. And it's fascinating because why would anyone think that someone would, voluntarily wake up in the middle of the night to puke? I mean,
right. So one night I went to see How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I love me a little theater. I did not have my largemouth Gatorade bottle with me because there were no drinks allowed in the theater. I was in the middle of a row, not near an aisle, and I proceeded to throw up in my leather purse for the entire second act.
R.I.P. leather purse.
Yeah, that was the end of that purse. It was not great. It was not great. So this will surprise you because I know I'm the first autistic person this happened to. But during this time, I was having trouble showing up for work and I managed to get fired.
Oh, God.
Please tell me you're shocked.
This is my shocked face.
Yeah.
Look at how shocked I am.
Now, I wasn't advocating for my needs, to be fair, and again, was not identifying as autistic.
Interesting self-blame, but go on.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. Well,
6 months pregnant.
Little bit of internalized ableism on that one, but we'll let it slide. Go on.
Yeah. 6 months pregnant. throwing up, not sleeping, football-sized tumor, no emotional connect. The prenatal yoga did not make me commune with my fetus. And my boss calls me into the conference room to tell me his newest idea. And he explains his idea. I don't remember what the idea was, but it includes a whiteboard and markers. At the end of which I say, I don't really understand that. Can you explain it again? And he very happily explains it again. And I say, look, Colin, I have a PhD in communications, and I don't even understand what you're talking about. I think we're going to have trouble selling that. Which felt very accurate. I do have a PhD in communications, and I don't think we could sell it.
All three of those are very accurate statements, yes.
Those were not the right statements.
So clearly, Colin took that as constructive criticism and said, perhaps it is my issue in explaining this effectively. Thank you for your criticism. I will work to do better.
Yeah. But didn't it go exactly like that?
Oh, my.
It was more get the fuck out of the conference room and don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out.
That is their way.
Yeah. But it really didn't. It never sold. It didn't work. It made no sense.
No kidding.
And he was
because again, a doctor of communication couldn't. Yeah, a doctor of communication couldn't figure it out, and it didn't work. No kidding.
So here's the thing. I'm not an award-winning masker. I know there are many people who are better at it than me, but when you put me into heightened sensory sensitivity 24/7 for 6 months, it's just not going to be my best masking moment. I'm already not great at it, but I just didn't have it. It wasn't there. It wasn't accessible.
And that's often a thing that I see a lot of women who come in after pregnancy because that's the first time that they realize that they might be autistic because they have all these traits they've masked for all these years. And all of a sudden, your system resources are being occupied by a tiny human who lives in your belly. And all of a sudden, you can't do the masking that you used to do.
Right. I didn't even know I was doing it, but it just was not there anymore. And when I would go to anyone for help, like friend, family member, I had a senior to me at work who had 4 or 5 kids. Her name was Karen. If I went, she wasn't my direct boss, but she was head of HR or something. Anyone I went to for help, there was this very common refrain of pregnancy is so hard, but keep your eyes on the prize. As long as you have a healthy baby, it will be worth it. And there are not many things that we ask people go through a very difficult thing with no help, no support, no interventions for 9 months. Do not complain about it. In fact, smile about it and tell us what color the baby's room is going to be. Which you're supposed to be excited about the baby's room. I was not excited about the baby's room. Football-sized tumor, alien, invader, bad thing happening in my body. I was not talking about how excited I was about the baby's room being blue or whatever the hell. It was green. But that was not on my list. And so when people would tell me eyes on the prize, as long as you have a healthy baby, it'll be worth it. This is the toughest job you'll ever love. I had one of two things. I would either tell them the truth. I'm I think I made a mistake. I don't think this is worth it. This is not working out for me, which people freak out. They do not want to hear that. Or I would have to agree. And it felt like I was betraying myself and my body and my needs in the biggest situation. The closest thing I ever had to this was I broke an ankle. And this was times 11, but I was supposed to smile about it. When I broke my ankle, I got so many popsicles. I was on a orange popsicles. I had so many popsicles. People signed my cast. I got to ride in a limousine on the way home. All these, everyone took care of me when I broke my ankle.
Yeah.
But this was times 11 and I was supposed to be happy about it.
And that, I think that's a thing that is often really, really ignored because it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of, your body is physically rearranging itself to accommodate a small human. That cannot feel good.
No, that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like your body is rearranging itself to accommodate a small human. 100%. Imagine that. That's what it felt like.
Yeah. You're going through a metamorphosis, and again, it's I get like American Werewolf in London sort of vibes where
Yeah.
you're just sort of mutating, and that I mentally hear the bones crunching as they open up and change around and shift, and that seems like that would be extraordinarily unpleasant. And
Actually, so that's very interesting. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but once I had a doula, a birth educator, explain to me exactly how like the pelvis shifts,
yeah,
and I could visualize it physically,
uh,
which it is very much that bone cracking, crunching, twisting when you see like the werewolf turning into the werewolf. That is what is happening.
yeah,
But being able to visualize it for me, I'm not saying this would work for everyone. I was like, oh, that's what happening. Yes, you would think that would hurt.
I
And
would.
during labor, I just said that I couldn't think, I couldn't talk. I was mostly echolalic or non-speaking, but the only thing I could say over and over again was opening, opening. And I just said opening over and over because I kept picturing the graphics that they showed me. I'm like, opening, opening. And people would ask me a question like, are you okay? And I would just yell opening at them.
As you proceeded to dilate, you visualized the process and detailed it for the world around you.
Correct. I'm
Because
very
that,
helpful.
yes, because this is the way.
Yeah. So labor in America is obviously super entrenched in capitalism, and the business model relies on a couple things that are important to understand about what happened to me next, which is
Oh
around
boy.
30. We're at like 32 weeks pregnant, so we're a couple months shy of giving birth, and they have a couple numbers they have to hit. So, in order for birth to be profitable at a hospital, they need around 90% of participants to accept the epidural.
Really?
So, yeah. So,
Huh.
there's a series of interventions that happen in birth. So the first thing is you've got your due date, which by the way is made up. Can you imagine if we gave like tulips a due date?
Yeah.
And we're like,
Yeah.
hey, all you tulips, you're going to need to come out April 1st, not a day later, or we're going to pour extra fertilizer on you.
Yeah.
So when your due date
Yeah.
comes, sometimes even before, if you're a fat girl like I was, they really want that baby out. And if they can blame problems, again, this has to do with like insurance models and all that stuff that doctors have to do. What's it called? The special insurance doctors get malpractice insurance.
Oh yeah.
So, so you get special treatment if you're over 30, and if you're fat, they got extra rules. I'm sure if you're autistic, God knows what they do to just stick you in a meat locker for 6 months or something. But they need 90% of people to get an epidural. And in order to make that happen, they have to start with a pit drip or the hormone Pitocin.
Ah.
The reason why is if they start you on a pit drip, your labor, instead of being natural, so just imagine a tulip coming out of the ground. It's going to come out slowly. You're going to see the little bud. Then it's going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to kind of move at its own pace, not by a clock someone sets for it. That tulip is your cervix opening like a flower. And that
Georgia
is,
O'Keeffe likes that.
yes, you're welcome, Georgia. And so that's going to happen at its own pace. And the pain is going to be proportional to that opening. When you do Pitocin, you're sort of like boosting the tulip with a ton of fertilizer and sun and water and screaming at it to open all at once. So if it was going to open like this, now it's like, and it's kind of like ripping open the leaves.
Oh
Like,
God.
So
Oh,
it
God.
is much more intense because that's not the way it's meant to go. Now, this is not to say Pitocin is never needed, or if you had Pitocin, you're a bad person. It's just to tell you what's happening. We're speeding labor because we want to hit some deadlines, which in theory have to do with saving babies and mom's life. And that would be true if America didn't have the highest rates of death, especially among Black women in particular.
Yeah.
But it's terrible survival rate, like worse than Yemen. Like America is a terrible country to give birth in because of the model of we got to get this number of epidurals to 90%. Like it's all about money. So we got to give you the pit drip. That's going to make the pain so much more intense that you will then need the epidural. Now, we need 90% of people to get epidurals, and that we're going to have a much better chance of that happening if we speed labor and give them a pit drip. So then you get the epidural, and there are often complications that lead to C-sections. Our C-section in America is among the highest in the world. It is 35%, and the UN World Health suggests 4 to 10% is what it actually should be. And again, women are also asking for C-sections to be scheduled in advance. This may actually be a good option for autistic people because you can know what's coming. That could be an actual accommodation you ask for because of your autism rather than a crash C-section or a surprise C-section. That 30% C-section rate is also what the hospitals need in order to hit their revenue goals and targets. So they're just like any sales organization. They've got quotas. They're going to make a lot more money on a C-section. They need to make those C-sections happen. They're much more likely with an epidural, which I'll explain why shortly. And epidurals are much more likely when you give a pit drip. So this is a cascading effect. It's extremely well documented. I'll put some links. Hensie Goer's book, The Educated Woman's Guide to Giving Birth, was much more helpful to me, and I'm pretty sure Hensie Goer is one of us. It is so evidence-based, you will not be able to shake a stick at it. She's got every data in there, and you're like, oh, this makes more sense than all that stuff and what to expect when you're expecting.
That's awesome.
So in order to get you that pit drip, because it all backs up to money, one of the things that OBGYNs do around the 32nd week of pregnancy, every doctor might be a little different, is something called an internal check. This is where they check your cervix to see if it's dilating. Now, why? The reason why is they need to know when it starts dilating so they can quickly get you on that pit drip for that reason I just explained, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I don't even think the doctors know they're doing this. They're just told it's a best practice, and that's what they learned in med school. I'm not sure how much they're questioning it. So this internal check, if you are in the UK and many other countries, you do not get this internal check. This is where I think our bad birth outcomes actually start in America, is way back in the 32nd week. So if your dog is giving birth, you don't need to know how the dog's cervix is doing. So they're just going to have a baby. You don't need to check on the tulip to see if it's going to bloom. It's going to bloom because it's a tulip and it's coming out of the ground. Like,
I got some odd imagery in my head about checking out a dog's cervix, but yes.
Okay, got you. Use gloves. Use gloves.
Just a picture holding up a dog and like microscope. I don't know. Go on.
So I think part of a lot of women want this internal check. They want to know, like, am I effaced? Am I dilating? Like, what's happening? Because it's weird. You can't see it, and it's a big thing. And when is it coming? And can I have a hint of the day?
Yeah.
But for me, I went in for my internal check. I didn't know what internal check was. I was not worried about it. It seemed fine to me. And this was a huge trigger warning here. Birth trauma, also sexual trauma coming up. This was the most traumatic to this day experience of my life. Okay. I have never felt more violated. I have never felt more pain. I have never screamed louder. This was more painful to me than labor. Also, you may be aware I'm very dramatic and histrionic, so maybe don't trust my experience and convince me not to trust my own experience too. That would be fun.
Wow, yeah. So many words there. Go on.
And I had recently done a play called The Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler. Somewhere in the research for that, or one of the monologues, I can't remember, but I think it's one of the monologues, there is a conversation about a wartime tactic of raping women with broom handles.
Oh, boy.
And to comfort myself as I was getting this internal check, I thought of the women who were raped by military personnel with broom handles and thought, well, they survived. I will survive this too. That is all I could think of. Now, I have not been raped, and I've definitely not been raped with a broom handle in a wartime situation. But for many women, and obviously we know rates of sexual abuse are higher for autistic women anyway, for many women going through this internal check, PTSD is triggered.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I don't know what was triggered in me, but it was something. And so I asked my doctor a question, 2 questions really. One, do we need to do this next time? And she said, yes, you must come back every week, and we will do this every week for the next 8 weeks.
Every week
For the next 8 weeks. I think it gets closer as you get closer to 40 weeks. And then the next thing I asked is, obviously this is very important because you wouldn't put women through this sort of like abuse and torture.
You'd think.
What happens if we don't do this? Like, let's just imagine for some crazy reason, we don't do this. Does the baby die? Do I not have the baby?
An excellent question.
Is it too late? Like, what is the value? And like, what could you find out? And then what would happen next? And could you provide me a chart of like, if this, then that, if this, then that. Like if you're not effaced at all and it's 33 weeks, what do we do? If you're very effaced, like I need to know what are all the rankings and then what do we do? And I'm happy to look this up myself. What do I Google? I didn't know the words dilated or effaced. Like, what do I Google? How can I find a chart so I understand what the interventions will be? What are we looking for? What are we worried about? What are we alarmed about? Is there a version where I get rushed to the hospital? I have a crash C-section? What happens?
Yeah.
We love sharing stories of autistic culture. And if you are seeing yourself in any of these stories and you're wondering if maybe you're one of us, or maybe you're already diagnosed or self-diagnosed, and you want to know if Matt can help you live your life better and be more authentically autistic, check out his website at mattlowrylpp.com. That's Matt, M-A-T-T, Lowry, L-O-W-R-Y. And then that LPP, it stands for Licensed Psychological Practitioner. So head on over to mattlowrylpp.com and learn more about working with my buddy Matt.
And the doctor says to me, I had no idea what this meant. Look, if you're here for a natural experience, go hug a tree.
That seems vaguely reminiscent of the broom handle.
I am not here for a natural experience. What on my face says natural experience? I am an avid indoors woman. I am not some earthy, birthy, crunchy. What do you say? Why would I want a natural experience? I don't understand the question. I had stepped into a bee's nest I did not know existed.
It seems like she's advocating for an unnatural experience by any means necessary.
No, what she is advocating for, my friend, is hierarchy. She's the doctor. I'm the patient. Why am I questioning her medical best practices?
Yeah.
I didn't know I was doing that. It was a literal question. My question is, what happened? What information are we getting and what are the things that happen?
Yeah.
This was not information for me to have or know or ask. And
Because
the
professionals have access to that information.
Correct.
You are
So
not allowed to have information.
I was suddenly treated like a terrorist. I was kicked out of the practice. I was told not to come back. I'm like 33 weeks pregnant at this point. I have no idea what happened. I had no idea what happened. So I'm Googling the most bizarre things, like, why did my doctor tell me to go hug a tree?
Right.
I did not understand what happened. And in the process of Googling, I met an amazing, famous, wonderful, world-changing woman named Penny Simkin. I will link her book in the notes. I don't know why she wrote me back. She is an incredible doula and birth educator. I was describing Bosnian rape camps in great detail, and she literally called me, I think it was 2 a.m., and she gave me the answer to what happens depending on what the doctor found and why it was so important. And this is the best part. She said, here's a problem with your question. The doctor can do a check today and find out you are 3 centimeters dilated and 30% effaced.
Mhm.
And then she could do a check a week later and you could be 1 centimeter dilated and 10% effaced. And then 15 minutes later, you could be 4 centimeters dilated. She's like, what they are measuring changes. It's not fixed. It doesn't progress because that's not how like human bodies work. So the reason she is checking this is because it's on her checklist to check it. Because if she doesn't check it, she could be sued for medical malpractice if anything happens to you. That is the reason.
Because the system.
Yes. And so you asking her a question that she can't answer with because you could sue me for malpractice if your baby dies led her to answer you, go hug a tree.
Which
And
somehow
that
seems worse.
Right.
That somehow seems like it's more likely to be malpractice. Because,
but
again,
no.
yeah, that seems like poor medical advice to tree hug. But, you know.
Yes. So it was more cover your ass medical advice. We're kicking you out of our
Yeah.
practice because you are, quote, non-compliant.
Oh, God.
Wasn't trying to be non-compliant. But anyway, Penny told me what I needed was a doula. And a doula sounded like something people who wanted to go hug a tree would get, which I just wanted all the things everybody else got. Like, give me the epidural. I just want the thing I saw on TV. I did not want I wasn't going for a natural birth. And doula sounded weird. And I don't know, like it would smell like patchouli or something.
You just don't want to be violated every week for
right.
8 weeks.
I'm like, why do I need a doula to not get raped with a broom handle? Like, what is this? Anyway, I did not know what a doula was. So let me explain this to everybody. If you or someone you love is going to have a baby from their body, get a doula. A doula is the person who is worried about the major body things that are happening to the mom. So there's lots of people there that are going to make sure the baby's heart rate is good and the baby's breathing and there's no mucus in the baby's mouth and all the baby things. But the doula is going to help you do 2 things. Identify your needs, and many of these are sensory needs. Work with your expectation sensitivity. So give you a sense of what's coming. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. Tell you how to advocate to the doctor, the nurse, or your partner or your mother. Give you the words that you might not be able to find. I was completely nonverbal during my labor experience. I was not formulating sentences, and she would just give me the sentences or ask me for permission to say things for me.
Because situational mutism.
Correct. And high stress, high trauma, high everything.
Yeah.
So, and while I met my doula, Mick McEwen, who changed my life, I met my doula when I was like 33, 34 weeks pregnant. And during those 7 weeks before I had the baby, I didn't know this, but she knew, maybe without knowing the words, that I had muted interoception. And she helped me identify what I was feeling. And she taught me what are the doctors and nurses going to ask me, and then what are the outputs they're expecting, and how can we map that on to how you're feeling. So to you might feel this, but here is what the doctors and nurses need to hear. So
I like that.
One of the things we talked about, so there's a very funny thing when you're pregnant, they want you to do a birth plan. They all know no one's going to pay attention to the birth plan because the baby's going to come out how the baby comes out. I made a birth plan. I got super attached to my birth plan. And she was like, we gotta grieve this birth plan because it's very unlikely this is how it's going to go. So she helped me let go of that. But one of the things in my birth plan had to do with when they make extra room for the baby to come out. It's called an episiotomy. And they do a little snip to make a little extra room. And in the birth plan, in everybody's birth plan, it's like a little checkbox. Episiotomy, yes, no, check one. And there are two options. So option number one is they take a scissor and they do a little clip. Option number two is the baby comes out and it rips. So do you want a clip or a rip? Now it's possible that their perineum it'll just stretch. So best case scenario is stretch. And then you would think worst case scenario is rip.
I would think so.
Snip would be better. Snip is not better. Imagine a piece of paper. Once you cut it, like let's say you cut it in advance, is it more or less likely to rip below the snip? If you cut it and then put pressure on it, it's like the way I cut wrapping paper. It rips further.
God in heaven. Oh, God.
Right. Well, it makes perfect sense because obviously our bodies are designed to have babies. And of course, sometimes something goes wrong. And if you snip then when something's going wrong, if the baby is stuck, that's a great time to snip.
That's a good
time.
But
if you preventatively snip, you may not have needed a snip at all. And it's much more likely to go further to a place that we will not discuss that starts with an A. So you do not want that deeper tear. And so I don't understand any of this because this is all based on the doula's mantra is informed consent. Informed consent is designed for autistic people.
Yes.
It is perfect for expectation sensitivity. She told me in great detail everything that was going to happen, why it was going to happen, when it was going to happen, how it was going to happen, every permutation of what was going to happen. She never got sick of my questions. And then I knew what was coming.
Yes.
So
we have that expectation sensitivity. We need to be prepared.
Right. So she said this thing to me that was so helpful. It may be 34 or 35 weeks. We're doing the birth plan. And she says they can't do an episiotomy without scissors. So when the scissors come out, they will often do an episiotomy without telling the woman. Whether it's on your birth plan or not, they don't read it. Remember, our whole goal here is to make as much money as possible for the hospital and the insurance company, et cetera. Yeah. And so that's going to increase interventions, infections, things like that. So they just do it on everyone. It's just in the handbook. Here's when to do it. So she's like, when you see the scissors, that's when you say no episiotomy.
But not before, because you can't possibly say no, because then they'll
just do it and you won't be paying attention. So like I knew what to look for. So early on when I got to the hospital room and I saw the scissors, I told the nurse, and I said it 15 times, but I was like, hey, I don't want an episiotomy. And then I told the next nurse that came in, hey, I noticed there's scissors there. We're not going to need those unless it's an emergency. I don't want a prophylactic episiotomy. Yeah. But I at least knew to say that, or actually I had pre-written it out and I had my husband saying it for me because I was screaming opening over and over again. Yeah. But I could just point to the scissors and everyone knew what I was talking about because that wasn't sprung on me in the middle of labor.
Yeah.
So anyway, most important thing my doula taught me was you are going to a pizza place and you are ordering Chinese food. So they have a way they do it. They toss the dough, they put the sauce on, they put the cheese on. It has to be that way every time. This is when we give the Pitocin. This is when we do the episiotomy. This is when we give the epidural. Like, there are all these interventions. They're in a book. They go in order. This is how we make the pizza. And if you think about it, this makes sense. If you hired someone at Domino's, you wouldn't be like, hey, make it up, cook whatever you want, run to the grocery store, just pick shit up.
Yeah.
It's got to be the same way. And hospitals are just factories. So there's only one way they can do it. And now I'm walking in and I'm like, oh, instead of using that dough for pizza, could you make some dumplings? And I see you have some ham. Could you put the ham in the dumplings? And I see that you have a deep fryer. Do you mind frying that with, instead of French fries? Like, so I'm asking for all these special things, which in theory you could get Chinese food at a pizza place. Like, you could bring some of your own ingredients. It would not be good Chinese food.
Yeah.
So I knew that. And then she gave me an option, which was you can either go to a Chinese restaurant, which is either a home birth or it is a birthing center. And we can make your birth plan happen.
Yeah.
Or you can go to a pizza place and ask for Chinese food and just know the system is set up for you to end up with an epidural and a C-section. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but 90% of people end up with epidurals, 30% end up with C-sections. Don't be surprised. Here are all the things we could do to try and make that not happen. But this is what the system is set up for. And that is what happened to me. So I ended up with, yes. So I ended up with a very disastrous epidural. I ended up with the C-section, but the positive part of this story for me is I was not surprised by any of it. I didn't have any of the confusion I was experienced when I had that. None of it was nearly as bad as that one cervical check that I had. Because I knew what was going to happen. I knew why it was going to happen. And I was totally prepared. So, and I learned how to advocate for myself. So I avoided the pit drip. I avoided the induction. The pressure was insane. The doctor's office was calling me every 15 minutes saying, you will end up having the baby in the hallway. You won't have your own room. At one point, this is a true story. At one point, the nurse called me. She's like, hey, you're 6 days overdue. We're really hoping you'll come in. We have 2 different kinds of underwear after you give birth. And one kind is paper and one kind is fabric. We're holding a pair of the fabric underwear, but I will only hold it if you can arrive by noon today. Otherwise, you'll get the paper underwear.
They're trying to entice you with the good underwear if you give them your service, if you give them your business now.
Is that not weird?
That is a bizarre sales tactic.
And my sister, who is a nurse and part of this system, grabbed my face, put her face right in my face and said, you have to go to the hospital right now. You're killing my nephew.
That seems, to borrow a phrase from earlier in the show, a bit dramatic.
Yes. Yeah, but I'm the dramatic one, so we can't. Yeah. She's the chill one. So everyone's telling you this. If you pay any attention to your sensory needs at all, the answer for compliance is you will kill your baby. You will kill your baby. And it is very hard to resist that, especially when you're in months and months of sensory overload.
Mm-hmm.
And then women make decisions that they regret and blame themselves for, which however you had your baby is how you had your baby. It's fine. For me, I did a couple things I was really proud of. I avoided the pit drip. I waited until I went into labor on my own. I labored at home for as long as I could. I used a bouncy ball, like a yoga ball, for a lot of my laboring, which was super helpful. When I got to the bathroom, I knew that they can't give the epidural if you're past 5 centimeters. And so I hid in the bathroom as long as I could, trying to get to 5 centimeters. And I just kept saying I had to go to the bathroom. So whenever they came in, I would be like in the bathroom so they couldn't catch me.
A lifelong autistic thing.
Yes, exactly. And we talked about that with Hannah Gadsby and Fern Brady. They both did the same thing. Like, we know how to hide in bathrooms. That's what we do. Ultimately, they caught me just before I was at 5 centimeters. They gave me an epidural. It didn't work, which is a problem that many autistic women have. Some of that shows up in that study I'm going to link. So there was a window in the epidural. It actually didn't work. And
but they charged you anyway. No.
Yes. Oh my, yes. And so it was sort of disastrous. And then my baby wasn't progressing enough. And so my baby was actually still in the sac. It's called in the call.
Uh-huh.
And when you have a baby in the call, it often just like slips out. There's no shoulders to negotiate. It's just like a beach ball. Is in the amniotic fluid. And Jesus
like
was
a human
born
egg. Yeah.
In the stories anyway. Jesus was born in the call. So a small percentage of babies were born in the call. I knew my water hadn't burst. We were at the point where I was pushing. I was really hoping he would be born in the call. And then what happened is there is something which is like the growth curves for children. It's called the Friedman curve. And that says how much progress you need to make, like by the hour. And I was failing the Friedman curve. And therefore, I had 2 options. They could either break the water, meaning he wouldn't be born in the call. It would progress labor. It would be much more painful. And my epidural wasn't working.
Oh, God.
Or they could go straight to a C-section. So I really wanted him to be born in the call, but I was like, okay, no problem. You can break my water. And I knew this would come because Mick had walked through every single possible scenario you can imagine. Yeah. So I was 100% prepared and I knew my answer, and they broke my water and the pain got much worse and the epidural worked much less. And I was in screaming pain and I was pushing the baby out, and now there was meconium.
Oh, yeah.
And that is basically baby poop that's in the amniotic fluid that if it gets in the baby's mouth, they could in theory die. Oh, and the nurse looked at me and said, "This is why I told you to come get the underwear." And what that meant was I was 6 days overdue, but they were trying to bribe me with nicer hospital rooms and nicer underwear and threats and intimidation and phone calls. They were trying to bribe me to come in early. I didn't, because I wanted to go into labor naturally.
Right.
And then they're like, see, you could have killed your baby. There's meconium, which means the baby pooped, which means the baby was ready to come out. And so
this could have been explained over the phone instead of talking about your underwear.
True. And they probably did explain it, but look, there's meconium in the poop of younger babies and it wasn't my fault. And also it's fine. And that's what we have suctions for. And doulas and midwives know how to deal with this. And this is not a big deal. But in the middle of pushing, they're like blaming me for killing my baby. So again, not a great scenario.
It seems like in the history of humanity, with the billions and billions and billions of human births, it seems like that might have happened once or twice, and that people survived.
Yes. And by the way, if they didn't break my water, the meconium in the sac wouldn't have mattered. But anyway, neither here nor there. They blame me and my body for being a lemon and incompetent so it's sort of proving I should have followed all their rules and not asked so many questions and not gone to a doula. Yeah. They are very excited to prove their point that they were right and I was wrong. So when I fail the Friedman curve, which basically says all people should be the same, and especially autistic people should be the same as allistic people, who were the only people that were measured on the Friedman curve.
Yeah.
Because the Friedman curve is not designed for autistic people.
Because when measuring the curve, the outliers are eliminated to make a nice curve.
Yes, sciencing.
Yeah.
So therefore, I had a crash C-section, but I knew it was going to happen, and I knew, short of going to a birth center or home birthing, which I made a conscious decision not to do, that I don't regret. I was just too scared, and I could not emotionally regulate, and it probably would have been its own sort of mess. So I highly recommend doing a home birth or a birthing center if you have the confidence and clarity, especially from the beginning of your labor. I was a hot mess, or from the beginning of your pregnancy. My whole pregnancy was such a mess. I just wasn't in a place to do it. I wanted to be in a hospital. And of course, because I was in hospital, it was medicalized. I ended up with a C-section. And while they were doing the C-section, they were basically like, we told you you're fat, so you should have just scheduled the C-section from the beginning. So that was fun. That was super fun. Anyway, this is what I want to tell you. I could have had so much more trauma than I did. And I know for many autistic women, this has to be worse. And it was a very bad experience for me. But because I found a doula, because Penny Simpkin called me back that night, I met an incredible community, including somebody who I'm still very close to today. Her name is Karen Brody. She is the author of the play Birth, which is a play where women tell their birth stories. Women in America tell their birth stories, which, whether you are autistic or allistic, there are some very bad birth experiences in America. And again, especially for Black women who are dying at insane rates. So storytelling is key. There's something called, if you can't find, every year on Labor Day, Karen's play is performed around the world. It's called Birth. You can find it on Amazon. I'll link it in the show notes. You can also find red tent communities where women get together and tell their birth stories. So
red tent, T-E-N-T?
Yes, red tent storytelling. So I also had problems with breastfeeding and postpartum depression. All of those things are connected to birth trauma. Yeah. Birth trauma is much worse for autistic women. It's important to get diagnosed. It's important to have a team around you who understands autistic women's needs, autistic birthing people's needs. And that's why I wanted to share this story. I wish there was more out there. I did find some great videos of autistic women that I'm going to share in the notes. If you want to share your birth story as an autistic woman, I would love to hear it. Matt, it sounds like you actually, I'm very surprised. You knew more. You've obviously had more clients with this issue. I really thought it was just me. I felt so alone, and I've never shared this from this perspective.
That's a thing, because I have a lot of autistic women who seek me out because, again, they know that I will listen to them and understand, and in doing so, in listening, I learn a lot, and I learn about people's experiences, and it seems like I wish that doctors listened as much as they should, because then maybe this kind of stuff wouldn't happen as much, and maybe the system might change a little bit to make the world a better place. But yeah, this is all unfortunately incredibly common for the autistic birthing experience, and that is rough.
Yeah, birth in America is bad. Birth is hard anywhere. Yeah. Birth in America is particularly bad. And some of the things I shared are just birth in America in late stage capitalism, right? And I think one of the things for me that I had never looked at until I decided to do this episode, but one of the things for me is, there are actual different experiences for autistic people that make an already bad system much worse for us.
Oh, yeah. And that's the reason why you need community and need to share your experiences and need to talk about it, because that way you know that you're not alone. Because that way, when they say, "Oh, clearly this is all your fault," it's like, no, it's a systemic failing, because there's a lot of people out there who experience the same thing.
Yeah. So if you listen to this episode and you are thinking of getting pregnant, what I have to say is I still don't think I would have loved being pregnant, but so much of this would have been better if I knew I was autistic and had some of my expectations set.
Yeah.
So, first of all, being able to find a doctor that is autism friendly would be key, and any sort of knowledge
Or
or
at least
open to
trauma
being
informed, because,
educated.
oh my God.
Right. Trauma informed would have been a big one. My, like a lot of I was depressed the whole time I was pregnant, and then postpartum depression. And a lot of that was because I didn't have anything magical happen to me.
Yeah.
I didn't talk to the baby. I didn't dream about the baby. All these things I thought would happen would be this like magical spiritual connection. And I felt like I was doing it wrong. And I didn't understand interoception. I didn't understand my sensory profile. If I understood all those things, there probably would have been some space left over for at least the kind of reflection and connection and thinking about what I wanted motherhood to be like. But I have spent the last 18 years still catching my breath from the day I found out I was pregnant. I don't think I've caught up yet.
Yeah.
It's all been one big drinking from a fire hose for 18 years straight.
Oh God.
Yeah, parenting is an interesting journey. And I think that so much of our culture validates the decision to have children by invalidating people who decide not to.
Yeah.
And while I wouldn't trade my child for the world, if I knew what I knew now, I probably would not have chosen parenthood or parenthood through this particular route.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great choice for me, really, physically, emotionally, mentally. Like it really wasn't well thought through. I didn't really understand myself enough. So I don't regret it, but also I definitely have a different opinion of people who choose not to have kids, because that might have been the right choice for me if I was a little more self-aware when I got pregnant.
If you knew the details ahead of time.
Yes. I love details ahead of time. So,
Oh yeah.
Anyway, but I am very happy to be celebrating my son's 18th birthday, and he is fabulous and wonderful and finishing up his senior year, and it has all worked out to be quite an amazing ride in parenthood that I would not trade for the world. So happy birthday to my son, Jesse. And with that, Matt, I am going to ask you, tell me something wonderful about being autistic this week for you.
Well, this is something that we talked about earlier, but I was very happy that I got to meet you in person, and that we got to meet and have a lot of info dumps and talk about collections and talk about all sorts of fun stuff, because we met to deal with some pretty heavy stuff, and it's good to know that we have people out there who understand us, and to meet up and have community. And
most people think we've met in person before, but we just as we're recording this, we just met for the first time after doing this podcast for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Maybe even longer.
Yeah. And it took a while before we started actually doing the podcast.
Right.
Coordinate
so it's almost 2 years.
Yeah. So that was the highlight of my week. So yeah, it was fun.
Well, that was a highlight for me too. And what I want to share, I love people's info dumps just because I love seeing how people light up, and I'm interested in what they're interested in a lot of the time. Doesn't mean it becomes my special interest, but one of my fun things about seeing your collections and some of your info dumps about them is it actually gave me new ideas for how to organize and display my connections that I think will bring even more joy into my life. And even though we have different collections, seeing what you've done with yours, which is so magical, I'm like, oh, I can step this up. So
there's always room to organize better.
Woo, the organization, the categorization, the colors, the sorting. I could have stayed all day just looking and not talking at how everything was, because overlapping sorting is where I get what if something is a crossover? It's like Star Wars, but it's Legos. What do we do? How do we sort it? And the systems were there, and you understand that I could spend hours on this one question. How do I?
You've got the forks, you got
shelf?
the spoons, and the sporks go in between.
Yes. Oh, it was a mastery. It was a master class. So loved meeting you too. Thank you for welcoming me to your home, to your town, and to the many, many ice cream parlors that are featured by your adorable Old Kentucky home. So
Absolutely.
thanks, everyone. I want to hear your birth stories. Matt probably has heard enough about birth stories to last him a lifetime, but I want to hear your stories. So jump on over to Substack and share and comment. As always, our podcast is free. A main podcast is free, but if you want some one-on-one time or some Q&A time with Matt and I, we do Q&As for our paid subscribers. You can sign up for just $8 a month. Join us for our next Q&A. We would love to have you there. We've also got some special episodes and gifts and fun things for our paid subscribers. So check it out over at autisticculturepodcast.com. Bye, everyone.
Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Autistic Culture Podcast.
If you like this show, you can help other people find it by taking a few minutes to rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
You can find out more about writing your book with me at differencepress.com. That's difference, DIFFERENCE, press, PRESS.com.
Or getting a psychological evaluation or consult with me at www.mattlowrylpp.com. That's M-A-T-T, Matt Lowry, L-O-W-R-Y, L-P-P, as in licensed psychological practitioner.com.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and remember,
no one ever changed the world by being like everyone else.
special thanks to our content manager, River Robbins, and Aaron Stoner, our producer, for making us look and sound good.